So today we're going to learn the opposite of free trade. It's protectionism. And it has the word protect in it because the goal is to protect your country, okay? So I can define protectionism and analyze arguments for it. So it's trade protectionism, obviously not military protectionism. This is an economics class. So what is protectionism? And it has the word protect in it. It's how governments attempt to make imported goods and services less desirable and less available in order to encourage the purchase of domestic goods and services. So making it harder for consumers and businesses within the country to buy things from other countries, trying to encourage them to buy things from domestically. And domestic means at home, so within the country that you're in. So there are different types of protectionism. The word protectionism is a large umbrella, and underneath that umbrella are these things. So tariffs, quotas, and embargoes. A tariff is a tax on imported goods. It can also be a tax on exported goods, but we're not going to talk about that. A tax on imported goods. So when a good is brought into the country, there is an extra fee slapped on top of it, and we'll get to that in a second. A quota is limiting the trade of a good or service to a certain number. So only 15,000 fully assembled Teslas can come to the United States or something like that. So it's limiting it to a certain number. It's not saying none, but it's saying a small number. And then embargo is we're not trading with that country or all these countries ever. No more. We're done until things get solved. So stopping all trade with other countries. Embargoes are very rarely used because they're just ineffective. Sometimes embargoes are called economic sanctions, and it's kind of like a punishment for other countries. It's usually used as a political point, like we don't like you, and so we're going to stop trading with you. Not so much an economic point. Oftentimes it's a human rights issue, not really a trade issue. So like in World War I during the Armenian genocide, when countries are slaughtering people because of their race, we embargoed those countries because it was a political thing. We know you're dependent on us, so we're not going to trade with you to make a point. During World War II, we embargoed Japan. We stopped trading with Japan leading up to Pearl Harbor and then afterward because it was a political point. We're not going to trade with who we're fighting a war with. And then during the Cold War, kind of the same thing. We didn't like Cuba. We didn't like their communist dictator, Fidel Castro, and so we embargoed and stopped trading with them completely to make a political point. Quotas are not used very much either, but they can be used. And it is... A quota, again, is a certain number or percentage is allowed to come into the country, is allowed to be imported, and then after that, after you hit that number, it stops completely. And so it can be set by a good, so like a certain number of Teslas or a certain amount of bushels of wheat or something like that, or by trading partners. So we're only going to allow $2 billion worth of stuff from China. That was a horrible example. $2 billion worth of stuff from Latvia, for example. So a certain number of that good from a specific country, or it could be like we're only going to allow 20,000 planes to be imported from any country. So we're going to set the clock at the beginning of the year, and once we hit 20,000 from any country, it's not happening. Or it could be from a specific country. We're only going to allow 10,000 planes from France. And that's all the planes we're importing from France. And that's a quota. And they're confusing and they're not used very often because they're not as effective. So tariffs are the main source of protectionism, the main type of protectionism. And they're the most frequently used. So remember, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. It's an extra fee slapped on top of a good that's imported. And when that tariff is collected, it's called a duty. So a tariff duty. U.S. Customs and Border Protection Patrol are in charge of collecting duties on imported goods because they're the ones regulating what comes into the country. So let me give you an example here. Foreign cars have high tariffs because in America there is a push for us to make our own cars instead of importing them. And cars are like a consumer good. Foreign cars are often seen as a luxury item. And so the American government has decided, and it's the government that decides to put tariffs and quotas and embargoes, has decided to put high tariffs on those things. However, foreign agriculture is rarely taxed because agriculture is not a want, it's a need. We need those things to produce food for our citizens, so we're not going to put a tariff on it and make it harder for Americans to get those goods. So there's just a little example. Tariffs are much more frequently used, and so they are more complex. So let's go through 3 different types of tariffs, but essentially the main type that we're going to be talking about this whole class is protective tariffs, but I wanted to expose you to all of them. So protective tariff, what we're focusing on in class, is levied to, and levying a tariff means the government has put a tariff on things, is levied to protect, protectionism, domestic industry. And the hope here is that because a good from another country now costs more money because there's a fee slapped on it, there's a tax, people will buy domestic goods. So it's hoping to protect domestic industry. And it encourages people to buy things at home and not import them. A revenue tariff is levied, is regulated in order to raise money for the government. And sometimes this tariff isn't even on imported goods. Sometimes it's on just domestic goods too. So in 2017, just for an example, the American government made $35 billion collecting money on tariffs. So protective tariffs also make revenue. It's not like these two are exclusive from each other. Revenue tariffs are protective tariffs. Protective tariffs can raise revenue. So it's just interesting. A good example of a revenue tariff is, if you remember your U.S. history, right after our country becomes a real nation, after breaking away from Great Britain, and we have the Constitution, a whiskey tariff is levied, a whiskey tax on whiskey in America. So the only reason that they did that was to make money off of whiskey because they know people are buying it. So they were just doing it to raise revenue for the government. Okay? And then finally, retaliatory tariff. That is when a country puts up a tariff and other countries put up a tariff as well. It's retaliatory. They retaliate and put up a tariff. And so let me draw a little picture here so you understand. So here's the United States. There's Texas. Okay, cool. And then here is Europe. Oh, this is going to be great. There's Italy. No, that was bad. Here's Italy. There's the boot. Okay. That was quite terrible. So we've got Europe over here. We've got the U.S. over here. And so the U.S. wants to protect the car industry. So they're going to put up a tariff so that they stop importing cars. So here's cars coming over. Not going to happen. Not imported. So now Europe is not making money from America, and Europeans can still buy American goods, but U.S. citizens are not buying European goods. So we've got this issue of Europe kind of being angry about this tariff, and they retaliate and put up their own tariff. And sometimes when this happens, this is called tariff walls or tariff fences, because both countries are putting up this tariff to protect their own industries, and then no trade is happening in here. It's like there's a big wall between them, okay? So let me give you an example here with math so that you can kind of see the effect of tariffs. Let's talk about China, our biggest trading partner, and let's pretend that China is making watches. Each watch is going to cost an American company $10 to buy, but the United States government levies a protective tariff of 20%. So now we take 20%, 0.2 times, each watch is $10. So now in order to buy that watch and get it to America, each watch is now $12 because 20% of 10 is 2 plus the actual $10 watch, and it costs now $12. So now you might be thinking like $12 boo-hoo is $2 extra, but this isn't just an individual buying a watch. Let's say this is Amazon or this is Kohl's, and Kohl's wants to order 15,000 watches to put in all their stores in all of America. Now what does that tariff do? It used to be $150,000 to buy each of these watches and put them in their stores within Kohl's. But when the government levied a 20% tariff and made each watch $12, it now costs $180,000 for China for Kohl's in the United States to buy watches from China. So they're still going to do it because they have to sell watches. That's a big thing at the jewelry counter at Kohl's. So how do they make up for that extra $30,000 that they had to pay in just tariffs? And that's $30,000 going to the U.S. government in revenue. How do they make up that cost? They charge customers more. So it cost them $10 to buy. They were maybe going to sell it for $15, who knows? Now it costs them $12 to buy. Maybe they'll hike the price to make some more profit, and they're going to charge you $17 or $20 to buy that watch. So tariffs can hurt consumers because companies have to make up that money somehow. So let me show you what graphing this protectionism would look like. So a graph, just like before, it starts with just goods at home, okay, and that's domestic. And then when a country becomes a sovereign nation, starts trading with other countries, no restrictions, then we open up this free trade, and we've gone out to global. And remember, we've done this already. And when we have more goods supplied on the global market, it drops the price and increases the quantity available for people. That's free trade. So when new goods are on the market, quantity increases and price shifts down. Well, what happens when we add a protective tariff on there? And that's that pink portion. So protective tariffs are going to be introduced, which is going to decrease the supply, right? We're not going to buy as much. There's not going to be as much available because we're putting up those barriers with countries. So that decreases supply, and people are now limited in buying those global goods. So this is supply with a tariff. And as you can see, from that global line, from that free trade line, we've gone inward, which means we're shifting our price and quantity as well. So what happened from the blue to the pink? So here's the blue, here's the pink. Price increased once we added a tariff. Not only because the price increased because we slapped a fee on top of it, but because there's going to be less stuff available and less competition. And then quantity from blue to pink decreased as well. People will buy less of that taxed good because they don't want to pay the tax. So the quantity of goods will go down as well. So prices increasing and quantity going down and less available for goods and less diversity of goods because of a tariff, why would that be a good thing? But there are arguments for protectionism as well. The hope is that it will protect domestic companies and jobs, and that people will buy things made in the United States and not made elsewhere, okay? This is the main reason why governments do it, that and making revenue off the tariff. Number two would be protect technologies such as defense and communication. So if there's a new invention or like new technology in a sense, if we put a tariff on importing other technologies, it's going to protect that technology and decrease the likelihood that it will be exported as well if other countries are putting up retaliatory tariffs. Number three says protect infant industries such as green technology. Again, think like solar powers or like some sort of new type of technology. If a company in America is making solar panels, it's an expensive expenditure. I mean, it's an expensive business. So they're making those solar panels and they're trying to sell them in the United States to encourage green energy. And a company in Germany has solar panels that are so much less expensive. If there's a tariff, it will protect that American company making solar energy in hopes that it will grow, and then eventually become less expensive and supply more, and our country will shift towards more green technology. So infant industries means it's a little baby industry. It hasn't gotten off the ground yet, but the government really wants it to become something big in the United States, like wind power or solar power. And then number four, it sends a political message, like we talked about, putting a tariff on a country that we're having issues with, or an embargo or a quota, just sends a message of like, if we don't like you diplomatically, we don't have to trade with you. And that is a deterrent because America is an economic powerhouse, but are we the only economic powerhouse? No. So there's arguments for protectionism and free trade, but honest to God, the best method is kind of a mix of both. We want to protect our domestic industries, but we also want our consumers to have more available to them by decreasing the amount of barriers like tariffs.